Venezuela declares European Union Ambassador Isabel Brillante Pedrosa persona non grata. South Africa plans to spend $688 million to vaccinate two-thirds of the population against COVID-19 and ensure the economic recovery of the country. And former president and opposition leader of Ivory Coast, Henry Konan Bedi, has called on people to turn out to vote in the March 6 legislative elections. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR English. I am Estefania Bravo from the headquarters of Quito in Ecuador. This is from the south. The government of Venezuela declared persona non grata the ambassador of the European Union in the country, Isabel Brillante Pedrosa, and gave her 72 hours to leave the country. The foreign minister, Jorge Arreaza, personally delivered the letter notifying her about her departure from the country after a meeting at the foreign ministry in Caracas. In the document, Arreaza indicated that the decision was taken because the circumstances require them to do so, referring to the fact that 55 European Union sanctions against Venezuela remain in place. The senior diplomat further noted that Caracas' response follows up that last Monday, the European Council added 19 Venezuelan officials to the list of people subject to restrictive measures for alleged actions to undermine democracy.
Precisely today, by decision of President Maduro, we have delivered to Isabel Brillante, who in the last few years has been the head of the European Union delegation in Venezuela, the declaration describing her as a persona non grata, according to the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. She has been given 72 hours to leave Venezuelan territory. And we do this because the circumstances so required. We do it because there are already 55 decisions, what they call at the European Union the American system of sanctions, as if they had some moral authority, which they do not have, or any legal authority to impose any punishment on citizens of another country.
Likewise, the Venezuelan foreign minister described the so-called European sanctions as unacceptable and noted they were imposed despite the dialogue process launched by President Nicolás Maduro.
It is truly unacceptable. It was a generous gesture from President Maduro that the heads of mission and missions of the European Union remained in Venezuela, when in February 2019 they did not recognize him when they were accredited. President Maduro called for dialogue. Maduro told his foreign minister, his vice president, the government delegation to dialogue with the European Union. He said that with Europe we should always seek points of convergence, ways for them to listen to us, to know our version and the truth, so that we can build paths to dialogue together.
In Colombia, the anniversary of the Regional Indigenous Council of Cauca took place this Wednesday. Several indigenous leaders and senators participated in the activities, which began on February 20th with walks and musical performances. The commemorations taking place over 5 days seek to draw attention to the indigenous struggle to recover ancestral lands. The Regional Indigenous Council of Cauca was founded on February 24th, 1971 as a federation of 7 indigenous chapters.
It makes me very happy that men and women, boys and girls, are today forging ahead with this process. And I must say, without fear of being wrong, the only popular social indigenous organization that managed to consolidate agrarian reform in Colombia was the Regional Indigenous Council of Cauca. From 280 hectares of land recovered in 1971, we went on to 600,000 hectares of recovered land from 6 town councils that were launched in 1971. Today, we are 126 councils. That shows me that it has been worth fighting, resisting, marching, mobilizing, being with the people.
The small and medium enterprises sector in Uruguay is in trouble while political and economic sectors demand solutions to help private small companies. Our correspondent in the country, Mateo Grille, has more.
The difficult situation experienced by thousands of small and medium-sized companies in Uruguay is a matter of concern for broad sectors. It is estimated that over 10,000 small and medium-sized companies have closed down since the health emergency was declared as a result of COVID-19. For this reason, different political sectors of the country, including those belonging to the government coalition, have demanded measures. The Colorado Party proposed giving more access to credit.
The first fundamental proposal is to make the central bank's conditions for rating companies more flexible. As you know, the central bank rates companies according to their capacity to pay the credit they are requesting. Well, we think that it is necessary to make them more flexible, especially for those companies that have fallen into a lower category during this period. So we have to restore the credit that they can receive.
Opposition sectors also demanded the government to take other measures such as pardoning debts, suspending foreclosures and creating direct subsidies to help companies in trouble. Otherwise, they claim a destruction process of productive capacities is on the way.
If we do not support this sector, evidently, we will end up with a process of destruction of productive capacities. More than 10,000 companies have already closed down Uruguay, small and medium-sized companies. Some of them very small, and therefore we understand that it is necessary for the state to support this sector in order to reduce the pressure on it, due to the important impact it has on the economy.
There are close to 200,000 micro, small and medium-sized companies in Uruguay, representing about 96% of the country's companies. They employ some 900,000 workers, almost 65% of the registered workforce. The government states that during 2020, it granted the SMEs $350 billion in loans. But the National Association of Small and Medium-Sized Companies claims that these loans are insufficient. The government measures are not enough.
Why insufficient? Insufficient because during this year, in addition to those measures I mentioned, there were some credit instruments with tougher conditions, we could say, but we are asking for those conditions to be improved even more, so that the credit would be granted to the company with no interest rate, so that the company would not have higher costs to finance itself.
SMEs also claim that the new measures announced came too late because the crisis is already affecting them. According to official figures, the Uruguayan economy dropped 5.8% in 2020, and over 60,000 jobs were lost in that period.
In Haiti, mass demonstrations continue demanding that President Jovenel Moïse steps down from office. The current political crisis is due to a dispute between Moïse's government and the opposition over when the president's term is supposed to end. Protesters have accused the U.S., the OAS, and other international organizations, such as the United Nations, of supporting Moïse's government. On Tuesday, Haitian police used tear gas and rubber bullets to suppress university students protesting against the kidnapping in the nation's capital. Students took to the streets to demand the release of their teacher, Abias Etumi, kidnapped last Wednesday by non-identified individuals. South Africa plans to spend $688 million to vaccinate two-thirds of its population against COVID-19 and ensure economic recovery.
We are allocating more than 10 billion rand for the purchase and delivery of vaccines over the next 2 years. But we do not stop there. We are increasing the contingency reserve from 5 billion to 12 billion to make provision for any further purchases of vaccines and to cater for any other emergencies. The South African economy is expected to rebound by 3.3% this year, following a 7.2% contraction in 2020, an average around 1.9% in the outer 2 years. Madam Speaker, honorable members, I am also hopeful because we are making meaningful progress in the implementation of our structural reform program. Our structural weaknesses limit the rate at which our economy can grow. Our structural reform agenda, as articulated in the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan, is aimed at removing these brakes on economic growth.
Malaysia kicked off its coronavirus vaccine campaign on Wednesday with its Prime Minister receiving the first shot. Malaysian Health Ministry and Director General also received the jab. The inoculation campaign is being carried out with the Pfizer vaccine. This country signed deals with several vaccine suppliers, including Pfizer and AstraZeneca. Malaysia aims to vaccinate up to 80% of its 32 million people by next year. More than 500,000 healthcare and frontline workers will be given priority in the first phase. Ukraine launched its COVID-19 vaccination campaign this Wednesday in hopes of halting the spread of the coronavirus that has put a significant strain on the country's weak healthcare system. Medical workers and military personnel in different regions of Ukraine were the first to get their shots of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, 500,000 doses of which arrived in the country's capital from India on Tuesday. Ukraine expects to receive more vaccine doses under the UN COVAX program. In addition, the country has signed an agreement to buy 1.9 million doses from the Chinese company Sinovac Biotech.
Ukraine is fully supplied for the first two waves of vaccination. We have an understanding regarding further vaccine supply to Ukraine. First of all, I'd like to inform that today we started a COVID-19 vaccination campaign. The Ministry of Health keeps its promises. As we announced earlier, the vaccination will begin in February and we started on time.
China hopes to become the leading supplier of COVID-19 vaccines to developing countries. This country will seek to gradually increase the production of vaccines against the respiratory disease by at least 2 billion doses this year and to 4 billion by 2022. The president of the Association of the Chinese Vaccine Industry, Feng Duya, pointed out that the production of doses will cover up to 40% of the global demand. China has already distributed doses of its vaccine to 22 developing countries and has assisted 53 more nations. The authority assured that the numbers will continue to rise as Beijing reaches more agreement with African nations. This Wednesday, Bolivia received 500,000 doses of the Chinese Sinopharm vaccine. China and Bolivia signed a purchase agreement to immunize health workers. President Luis Arce was present at the Viru Viru International Airport to receive this shipment. Arce directed the Minister of Health to coordinate the mass vaccination of the Bolivian population. The campaign is set to begin this Thursday in the Department of Santa Cruz and will firstly allow the immunization of all healthcare personnel. At the beginning of the month, the nation received the first batch of 20,000 Russian Sputnik 5 doses, with which over 10,000 intensive care professionals were inoculated. To date, Bolivia registers more than 244,000 COVID-19 cases and over 11,500 deaths.
Today we have 500,000 vaccines for the Bolivian people. Of these, we are buying 400,000 as a country. More will arrive in the following weeks. And also, President Xi Jinping is donating us 100,000 of these vaccines.
Moving on, Cuba is trying to control the increase of the positive cases in the country with only 1 week to go before the start of the first stage of immunization, using the first vaccine candidate domestically created and produced on a mass scale in Latin America. Let's have a look.
Streets are closed in the Cuban capital, in areas where the novel coronavirus is presently most active.
We are preventing the spread of the epidemic by preventing other people coming from different neighborhoods, from another municipality from entering the area, controlling the entry and exit of personnel.
Havana continues to confirm the highest daily number of new coronavirus cases on the island, and the barricades set up in the city are aimed at tackling the most complex epidemiological situation in Cuba since the beginning of the pandemic.
A survey of 100% of the population is being conducted to try to identify all the contacts of those who have tested positive in PCR tests.
In the first 21 days of February, the number of cases surpassed those registered in January, and in the first month of the year also exceeded the number of positive cases confirmed during the whole of 2020. The growing trend, also in terms of mortality rate, is attributed to the lack of rigorous compliance with health protocols. At the same time, the tightening of the United States blockade preventing the supply of goods and services to Cuba makes maintaining physical distancing harder.
I'm not afraid, but I am concerned. You don't know who is asymptomatic.
Meanwhile, Cuban technicians and scientists are working against the clock to produce the Soberana 02 COVID-19 vaccine on a mass scale, in laboratories certified by the World Health Organization. Next week, mass vaccination against COVID-19 begins in Cuba, with the aim of immunizing the entire population before the end of 2021.
The former president and the opposition leader of Ivory Coast, Henry Konan Bedi, called this Wednesday for a massive vote in the March 6 legislative elections, thus joining former head of state Laurent Gbagbo, with whom he's allied. Bedi and Gbagbo did not recognize the October 2020 re-election of President Alassane Ouattara to a third term, but they nonetheless decided to participate in the legislative elections.
President Gbagbo and I solemnly call on all the daughters and sons of Ivory Coast who love fraternity and democracy to participate in the legislative.
Moving on, demonstrators clashed with police in the streets of Niger's capital, Niamey, as opposition candidate Maham Wasmane claimed victory in Sunday's presidential election, despite the Electoral Commission announcing provisional results on Tuesday that gave the ruling party candidate Mohamed Bazoum the win. The opposition leader claimed he narrowly won the elections a day after official results said he lost by more than 11 percentage points. Police clashed with Umane's supporters in Niamey on Tuesday after the announcement, and protests also took place in Zinder, the country's second largest city. Ahmad Abdulaziz Abdullah, or better known as Abu Wala, a notorious Iraqi preacher said to be the Islamic State's terrorist group's de facto leader in Germany, was sentenced to 10 years and 6 months in prison by a German court. He was accused of directing a terrorist network which radicalized the young people in Europe and helped them travel to Iraq and Syria. He was found guilty of belonging to a foreign terrorist organization, helping to plan violent acts and financing terrorism. The verdict marked the end of a special case which was very long and complex. This Wednesday, the newly elected president of Kyrgyzstan, Sadir Saparov, made his first foreign visit to Russia. Saparov met with Russian President Vladimir Putin and other Russian politicians. Putin congratulated Saparov on assuming the presidency in late January and noted the strong bilateral ties between the two countries. The Kyrgyz president thanked Putin for Russia's help during the political crisis in Kyrgyzstan late last year that saw mass protests and the resignation of the previous presidents. Saparov added that Kyrgyzstan intended to continue strengthening strategic relations with Moscow, as well as cooperating with Russia in international organizations.
I would like to start right away by congratulating you again personally with assuming the presidency of Kyrgyzstan. Our countries have built not just warm relations, but allied and privileged relations. I'm very glad that Russia is first when it comes to your country's trade partners. We greatly hope that you will be able to stabilize the political situation in your country.
We intend to continue strengthening our strategic partnership and allied relations. First of all, I would like to thank you for your support and multifaceted assistance in resolving the political crisis in Kyrgyzstan. We intend to continue our cooperation with the Eurasian Economic Union, CIS, CSTO, and SCO. This is the priority of the foreign and economic policies of our country.
Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro's destructive policies of increasing mining activities in the Amazon rainforest are affecting the entire country. Our correspondent there, Brian Muir, has more.
Far-right Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro is notorious for encouraging mining in the Amazon rainforest, but his destructive policies are affecting the entire country. In an UNESCO-designated sustainable agriculture landscape in the Pampas region, a multinational corporation called Nexa Resources is trying to start a mining mega operation.
Researchers and the state government recognize through several studies that this is a priority area for conservation, especially because the area has been conserved. In other words, it is an asset that has the highest value in the world today.
After the company announced its plans, a coalition of dozens of local farmers' associations, unions, and academic organizations called a Grupa was created, which fought and won a political battle, halting Nexa from opening a huge strip mine for lead 800 meters from the Cauca River.
If it weren't for the people, the mine would already be operating here. But from the moment that the people mobilized, a lot of us united. This caused repercussions with the politicians, because we know that politicians depend on the people's approval.
Immediately after the strip mining project was halted, Nexa Resources began new legal maneuvers to push the project through anyway, but a Grupa continues to fight back.
It is more important than ever for us to maintain our movement, our resistance and our broad dialogue with diverse actors so that the struggle doesn't fade and the people don't get lost in the shuffle and give up.
Meanwhile, a Grupa has joined 50 other like-minded coalitions in the Committee to Fight Mining Mega Projects in Rio Grande do Sul. Brian Mir, teleSUR, São Paulo.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on our social media accounts as well. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram too. For teleSUR English, I am Estefania Bravo. See you next time.